Hello, and welcome to the red limited set review for Outlaws at Thunder Junction. Today I'm going to be talking about how good I think the red cards are going to be in limited draft, more specifically. Before the set comes out, just to sort of go over the cards, get familiar with them, talk about what they do, how they interact, maybe provide some insight along the way, maybe not, maybe say something entertaining, maybe perhaps not. You never really know with me. If you have not been here before, these are the tiers that I use to grade the cards. They're a little different from maybe the way that a lot of other people do card ratings, but that's okay. They're pretty simple. Tier 1 is good cards, tier 5 is the bad cards, and there's tiers in between that, but these are sort of a brief description of what the tiers are sort of loosely supposed to represent. Um, and that's it. It really is more about me talking about the cards and what they do and why they're good than necessarily like what tier they're in. But nonetheless, the tiers make it simple, and I am back and I'm ready to go with Brimstone Roundup. 1 and a red for an enchantment. When you cast your second spell each turn, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with the ability that they all have. You can plot it for 2 and a red. So this card's very interesting. I originally had it lower, and I moved it up because it is a cheap spell, which means that you can double spell with it on like turn 4, or you can plot it. Do you really want to be plotting it? No, but whatever. That's okay. And realistically, you only need this to trigger twice for it to be a good card, right? You only need 2 triggers, and will you be able to double spell 2 times over the course of the game? In decks that are built to sort of do that? I think the answer is yes, and so I've sort of put it in tier 3. It does kind of enable itself because you're not really double spelling when you plot, you're double spelling, but you're not really double spelling. You've spent the mana earlier, and then you're gonna get the value of the mana later, right? You already cast your spell a turn early, and actually plotting this I think is kind of reasonable. I don't think playing this on 2 is very good. I don't think you really want to be doing that. You probably should if you don't have anything else to do, but I would be pretty depressed if I was playing this on turn 2. It's not it's kind of a disaster. It's almost better to just not play it. I don't know. Depends on how many 3s you have. But yeah, that's the concern, is that this gets stuck in your hand when you play it. Like, you don't want to play it on 2 because then you're not enabling your double spell, and then it can cause problems there. But yeah, I think it has enough upside that I'm interested in it. Calamity Galloping Inferno. 4 red for a 4/6 with haste. When it attacks while saddled, it has saddle 1. Choose a non-legendary creature that saddled it and create a tapped an attacking token that's a copy of it. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Repeat this process once. So basically, you make 2 copies of a thing that saddles this, and then you're attacking with this and 2 of those things. And yeah, that's a lot of damage. Okay, I mean it's 6 mana for 4/6 haste. So like, I'm trying to find a reason to not put this in tier 1. How good was the haste dragon thing? Is this thing better or worse than that big haste dragon from Wilds of Eldraine? That was like a 6 mana 4/6 haste flying, and you could like pay a bunch of mana to deal 1 to something over and over again. This can make a copy of a thing that you have. Make 2 copies of a thing you have and attack with those. I think it's just 6 mana, and as a result, I'm going to not put it in tier 1. But, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's actually tier 1. It's good, but I don't think it's, like, amazing or anything. I mean, I do think it's amazing. I guess let me walk that back. I think it's so tough, but this is really a difficult card to grade in terms of tier 2, tier 1. Tier 1 is I'm trying to shoot for cards that win 60% of their games, you know what I mean? Like that's really where I'm trying to be at with tier 1. And this card I think is going to be a little bit short, but maybe it'll get there, and I'm just like slightly wrong. Either way, it's really good. Caught in the Crossfire. It is red for an instant with Spree. It deals 2 damage. You can pay 1 to deal 2 damage to each outlaw and 1 to deal 2 damage to each non-outlaw. So This is a really tough evaluation. There are a lot of outlaws in this set. Does that make this card good, or does that make this card bad? I think the answer is it makes it closer to even than usual. Sometimes it looks like Plague Wind. Sometimes it looks like, you know, really, really bad Crush the Weak. I don't know, man. Like, sometimes your opponent has Outlaws and not Outlaws. Sometimes you have Outlaws and not Outlaws. It is an instant, I guess. So there's that. Maybe I'm not giving enough credit for being instant. 2 damage for 3 mana that's double pipped, though. I'm just not seeing it, man. I'm really just not seeing it. It could surprise me. Certainly a card that's on my list of things that could surprise me, but early on, I'm just not excited about it. Cunning Coyote. 1 and a red for a 2/2 with haste. When it enters the battlefield, another target creature you control gets +1/+1, and haste until end of turn. You can plot it for 1 and a red. Yeah, this is one of those cards. I've been looking at this and I'm like, maybe you're just never supposed to play this on turn 2. And the answer is like, I mean, you probably are, but I mean, I don't know. Like, you're probably getting more damage by just waiting 1 turn. If you just, it's gonna depend on your hand. It's gonna depend on your hand, but I mean, like, yeah, it also allows you to double spell, and it's like a 0, like just very flexible card, strong card, like the 2-drop, you know, can't complain, right? Deadeye Duelist. 1 and a red for a 1/3 with reach. You can pay 1 and tap it, and it deals 1 damage to target opponent. So, I really like this. They've done, you know, effects like this, where, you know, it's kind of a more defensive red thing that can close the game eventually. They tend to be sort of medium. I like this when it commits a crime. Obviously, for 1 mana, it's cheap to do that. It causes you to commit crimes on your opponent's turn, which is not something that you can always do easily. It is defensive, which is generally not good, but again, you're not going to want to play this in your super aggressive decks, but your mid-rangey decks, you're going to want it, probably. And I think it's an okay 2-drop. It has reach as well. Nice. So I think it just does enough. I think it does just enough for it to be pretty good. I'm kind of excited about this one. I could see this one moving up too. Demonic Ruckus. 1 red for an enchantment. When an enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has menace and trample. When Demonic Ruckus is put into your graveyard from battlefield, draw a card, and you can plot it for a single red. So I put this in tier 3 because I got wrecked. I got owned by the one from the last set where I got burned by that. This, I think, is better than that card was. When that card was like tier 4, because it draws you the card, which is better than getting this back. This also has synergies with double spelling. It is something to do on turn 1 with your mana, which is significant. But it is still an aura. Your opponent can blow you out, and they can also see it coming. So it's not even, and even the thing is, it's like, is it enough? Menace and Trample, is that enough? 1/1 Menace Trample, is that enough of a boost? I don't think it's Rancor, but put it that way. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. Discerning Peddler. 1 red for a 2/2, and it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card if you draw a card. So, you know, solid 2-drop, you know, gets you value immediately. You can discard something and then draw something else. You know, you get to Rummage. It's good. ETB Rummage is solid. Like, it's also an outlaw. So, yeah, happy with this. Explosive Derailment. Single red instant with Spree. It has +2 colorless to deal 4 damage to a creature, and you can pay another 2 colors to destroy an artifact. Really flexible card that's good removal. You know, 3 mana, deal 4 at instant speed. Pretty good. And, you know, sometimes you want to pay an additional 2 to destroy an artifact. Just really great. Makes artifacts a lot worse in the set. Ferocification. 2 red for an enchantment at the beginning of combat on your turn. You can choose one. Target creature gets +2/+0. Target creature you control, sorry. Not handing out free crimes on this one. Target creature you control gains a menace and haste until end of turn. Man, this actually would have been so good if it let you target your opponent's stuff, because it would be free crimes. That would be. Then this. Wait, why didn't they do that? It wouldn't be too good. This is misdesigned space. I'm mad. I'm now officially upset. If this card outperforms my expectations, I will retract my statement of being upset. However, if this card ends up being as bad as I think it is, I am filing an official complaint that this card does not let you target your opponent's stuff. Because I don't even think it would make it that much better, but at least it would do something interesting, okay? In this one limited context, it would do something that was interesting and interactive with the set mechanic, instead of not doing that and making the card useless. Anyways, moving on. Gila Courser. 2 in a red for a 4/2. When it attacks while saddled, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card and you can saddle it for 1. So, solid 3-drop. It's 4/2. It's got big attacks. The saddling doesn't help it do anything other than draw you a card, but drawing cards is how you win games sometimes. And there's a 4-power matters thing, and it's a mount. Just fits in a lot of synergistic places. Not really a whole lot to complain about with this card. But I'm not super excited either. It does get blocked by 2-drops. The saddle cost is relatively minor. Theoretically, there can be situations where you get to activate it twice, and that's great. It doesn't block well. I'm talking myself down, but I think the added value makes it solid enough, Great Train Heist. Single red mana for a spree instant. You can pay 2 to untap all creatures. 2 in a red to untap all creatures you control. If it's your combat phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. And you can pay 2 colorless mana to give your creatures +1/+0 and first strike, and you can pay a single red to make treasures when your creatures deal damage to your opponent. So this is a really weird card. It's one of those cards that always looks kind of appealing, but I think, what is this card actually doing? 3 mana for +1/+0 and first strike? Not excited about that. That does not excite me. And then you're paying 1 to make a bunch of treasures? Yeah, I don't know. Not super excited about this one. It really does look kind of like if you're already winning the game, you win it as faster. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, you had 5 creatures on board, and your opponent had nothing. Oh well, you won harder. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know. Not super excited. Speaking of which, Hell to Pay, X in a red for sorcery. It deals X damage to target creature. Create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the amount of excess damage dealt this way. Don't pay more than you have to for your removal spells. You can play this. X and 1, remove a creature, is a tier 4 card, and that is basically what this is. The treasures, sometimes you get 1 or 2 things. Sometimes you can bank your mana, but that's just not worth the downside of this. Hellspur Brute. 4 in a red for a 5/4 with affinity for Outlaws, and it has trample. Yeah, this card's a house. So, I mean, the average case scenario is that this costs 4 mana. So 4 mana, 5/4 trample in red, pretty big. That's big. And there are going to be some games where you can cast this on 3, and it's not totally ridiculous to think that that's going to happen. I don't know, 10% of the time. I could see I think 10% of your opening hands, it could be somewhat realistic to be hey, if you have a critical mass of 1-drops that are Outlaws, which the black one is, be advised. I think the red one is also an Outlaw. Yeah, we'll get to the red 1-drop, which I like a lot later too. This is just so good. Yeah. Hellspur Posse Boss. 2 red for a 2/4. Other Outlaws you control have haste. This, by the way, into this, what a house. You on turn 5, you play this, you make 3 Outlaws, and then you give this thing haste. Holy, anyways, it's only 5 or 6. Now that is a beating. And this thing makes 2 mercenary tokens when it enters the battlefield too. It's a 2/4. So despite being double pipped, I've put this in tier 1. It makes 4 3-game objects and gives like 50% of your creature's haste. Pretty dang good. Opponent's got to kill it. They're never up cards when they kill this thing. Your tokens can buff creatures immediately or attack. It's just really nice. It's just really good. I really like this card. Highway Robbery. When a red for a sorcerer, you may discard a card or sacrifice a land. If you do, draw 2 cards, and you can plot for 1 in a red. I really like this design. This design solves a lot of the problems that this card has, which is that, you know, when you play it early, you don't really know what you need. Like, the problem with these cards typically is 2 mana, you know, whatever the Tormenting Voice style cards is that on turn 2 they're not very good, and the reason for that is you don't really know what you need. You kind of got to make a decision early in the game about stuff that you don't have enough information to make a good decision about. When they work out, they're pretty good. Like when you discard a land and you draw a land spell, you're like thrilled that you did that. But that doesn't happen every time. This eliminates a lot of that variance by sort of moving it into the future, and you can sacrifice a land to this too, which is nice on like turn 7. Or you can double spell with it. I don't know. I like this card a lot. There's a lot of different cool things you can do with it. It is not a 2-drop, but it is a nice little flex slot. You know, I don't think it's like super premium or anything, but it's a nice little flex card to put in your deck and smooth your draws out and stuff. And I don't know. I like that. In whatever. Wolverine, 2 in a red for 3/2. It enters the battlefield, exile the top card of your library until the end of turn. You may play that card. So, it also has plot for 2 in a red. So on turn 3, you plot this, turn 4, cast it, and then you get to basically draw a card. This card's really sick. It is, does have similarities to Cyril's Packmate. I want to be very clear on my stance on this. I do not think it is as good as Cyril's Packmate. I would like to state clearly that my take is that this card is not as good as Cyril's Packmate. With that being said, I do think the card is very good. It is, just a value in, fits into all your 2 double spell synergies, fits into your, it just draws you a card. It makes 3/2. The perfect body on something that draws a card is a 3/2 because your opponent is never happy to trade with it. Even if it trades down, it's totally fine to trade this for a 2/2 because you've already got value. So you're just happy. You're happy to have this card in your deck. Iron Fist Pulverizer. 4 in a red for a 4/5 reach. When you cast your second spell each turn, it deals 2 damage to target opponent and scry 1. Yeah, so this looks a lot like Panicked Altasaur. I don't think this is quite as good as Panicked Altasaur because the Panicked Altasaur could just tap to deal 2 every turn. This isn't quite that good. The types are slightly worse as well. But, I mean, the threat of, doing 2 damage, once. Really the Panicked Altasaur, most of the time, was kind of doing the 2 damage, once or twice. That's kind of all it needed to do. This can definitely threaten to do that. On turn 5, you can play it. It is a pretty good blocker. We've just kind of seen these, 5 mana, 4/5 reach creatures in red be kind of decent and overperform expectations for a little while now. Again, not going to rate them as super premium. I have it in tier 3 just because, it's not amazing, it's not premium, but certainly a playable card. I don't think you're going to be too upset about having it in a lot of situations. Longhorn Sharpshooter, 2 in a red for a 3/3 with reach. When it becomes plotted, it deals 2 damage to any target, and it is plot for 3 in a red. So I think this card's really, really good. So this card is a my playstyle type of card too. This is a card that for some is going to perform worse than it's going to perform for me. I really like these style of cards that are modal, that get you value for doing things that you want to do anyways, that enable you to just play play them at multiple points of the curve and be impactful. Answer a lot of your problems. One of the problems with plotting is that you're not impacting the board. Well, this one solves your problem. Obviously, you're paying a little bit of a premium, but you are impacting the board and you're slowing your opponent down. And you're still getting your creature out of the deal, and you're enabling your synergies, and you're doing all this stuff. So I really like this. I like the flexibility. I think it's solid. It is an outlaw, so yeah, like it. Magda the Hordemaster, 1 in a red for a 2/2. When you commit a crime, create a tapped treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn. You can sacrifice 3 treasures and create a 4/4 red dragon, a creature token with flying and haste, and activate only as a sorcery. So this is really like your treasure payoff if you can find a way to make a bunch of treasures. Like, this is the thing to do in the set with treasures, honestly, and it's a rare, so you know it's a fine card. It's a good 2-drop. I don't think it's amazing, but I think it's good. You will be committing crimes fairly frequently, and this will be making tap treasure tokens frequently, which is good. Those are things that you want to be doing. Those are things that are good for you, and you're going to be happy about that. Magebane Lizard. 1 in red for a 1/4. When a player casts a non-creature spell, it deals damage to that player equal to the number of non-creature spells they've cast this turn. Yep. So this is just not what red wants at all. It's a 2-mana 1/4, which is not something red's super interested in. It is like an anti non-creature spell card, but red wants to cast a lot of non-creature spells too, so like, I think this is just terrible and you don't want it. It's a constructed sideboard card, basically. Mine Raider. 2 red for a 3/2 with trample. When it enters the battlefield, you control another outlaw creature. You know what, actually, I need to bump this back up. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. It's back in Tier 3. I had it in Tier 3 originally and moved it down because I was like, oh, it needs another thing. Every creature in this set's an outlaw, so like, this is just going to be triggering on turn. Even on turn 3, it's going to be triggering like most of the time. And it has trample, which is nice. So like, I don't know, the pirate from LCI is sort of very similar to this. I think this is about the same. That one just made the treasure all the time. This one has trample but doesn't make the treasure all the time. Like, those things are pretty close to even. I think those are pretty close to reasonable costs. So I'm pretty happy about this card. Outlaws Fury. 2 red for an instant. Creatures you control gain +2/+0 until end of turn. If you control an outlaw, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. So you've seen, this title effect get card draw stapled onto it, and it tends to be kind of okay. And this one is another one there. I'm like, again, you're gonna have outlaws. Like, I can't imagine a situation where you have a board that is wide enough for this card to be good, and it not having an outlaw on it. So I think this pretty much triggers every time. And if it doesn't, you're winning the game. So, like, again, if you're putting this card in your deck, you need to be going wide. But with that caveat in mind, this is a good card as a one-of because it, does just have spots where it's completely unbeatable, right? Like, it is just an unbeatable card. But for me, and in a lot of spots, it just, cycles. Trades up, draws you a card. Great. And it's the end of your next turn. So, like, I don't know. What is there to hate about this? Not a whole lot. Prickly Pear, here it is. Best common. 2 in red for a 2/2, and it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 mercenary token. Simple, easy, excellent. We've seen this type of style of card just be really, really good every single time they do it. And this creates 2 outlaws, so it's just nuts. This card's just nuts. Quick draw. Single red mana for an instant. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains first strike until end of turn. Creature's target opponent controls loses first strike and double strike until end of turn. So this commits a crime. It's sneaky. But yeah, the trick is pretty medium. We've seen +1/+0 first strike. The difference between +1/+0 and +1/+1 in first strike is exceedingly small because the first strike is kind of like already giving you the ability to do the trading up. So I can't imagine that additional point of toughness is going to be amazing. So yeah, I'm not excited about this effect, and I actually should have put this in Tier 5. Why didn't I do that? That was dumb of me. This is supposed to be in Tier 5. Hold on. I've had a couple of live changes to the tiers in this one. They basically printed this effect a ton of times, and it's never been good. So I expect that this one will also not be good. Quilled Charger, 3 in red for a 4/3. When it attacks while saddled, it gets +1/+2 and gains menace until end of turn. You can saddle for 2. This is just sort of like your stereotypical like bad red 4-drop that they sort of print every once in a while, where it's just like, it doesn't block well, it requires work to attack well. Like, why? Like, when you compare this to just rabble, you know what I mean? Chimney rabble? Like, the difference is just immense. So I don't, yeah, I don't, I don't really know what's going on with this one. I'm just not excited in any way. Here's another one I am excited about: Reckless Lackey. 1 mana, 1/2. First strike, haste. You can pay 2 mana red to sacrifice it and draw a card and create a treasure token. This is like actually absurd. This card is like ridiculous. Why does it have all of these abilities on it? Like, this card is unreal. Like, this card is unreal good. Why does it have first strike? I just don't like why. Why does it have that? It's like your opponent can't ever block this because they're like, well, if they have a combat trick, it's just over. Like, it's just over immediately. And it's like, I would be like, okay, like, it's like, oh well, if they printed this and they didn't made it like, oh well, they made it not an outlaw, so it's actually not as good. No, it's just an outlaw. It's just also an outlaw. I don't know. This card is like almost. Notice I'm saying almost as good as 3-Bit Inspector. However, it is not quite that good. So it is in tier 2 and not tier 1. However, it is unbelievably flexible and strong and is a very, very good card. And will go insanely late early in the draft format, and all the best decks are just going to be this card. You're going to be seeing a lot of this on turn 1 and week 1 of the format. Resilient Roadrunner, 1 and a red for a 2/2. It has haste and protection from coyotes. And it has 3, and it can't be blocked, but this turn except for creatures with haste. So, obviously this is a worse card than the coyote, which sucks. I know it has protection from coyotes, I understand. It's we know the reference. Everybody knows what this is referring to. However, the card should be better than the coyote, okay? Anyways. Still a decent 2-drop. It's fine. It has haste. It might even be better. I don't know. Maybe I'm just stupid and this thing's better. But, 3 mana to make it unblockable. A lot worse. A lot more than Ginger Brute's ability. A little bit more expensive. So, can't just sneak it right by you, So, yeah. I think this is still fine. Return the Favor. 2 red for a spree instant. It has +1 to copy target instant's sorcery spell, activated ability, triggered ability, you choose target for the copy. And you can also pay 1 to change the target of a spell or ability with a single target. I never really liked these kind of cards. To be honest with you, I have never played with one that was actually playable. I think Bolt Bend was kind of reasonable in War of the Spark. Is one that people tell me was reasonable. I did not play War of the Spark. This is double pipped, so I am already sort of throwing it in the trash. And I like double pipped cards that are situational get even worse. Like, they get a stacked effect on how bad it is for them to be double pipped than cards that are not as situational, because like sometimes the situation comes up that you want this, but you can't cast it because it's still pipped. It's like, wow, what a disaster. Like, sometimes, like, at least with the other cards, it's like, well, I couldn't cast my double pip cards, but next turn it's still going to be good because it's just a good card. This is not like that. And so that has issues as well. I'm not excited about this. I'm sure there are people that are excited about it. It's just not super enticing to me. Rodeo Pyromancers. 3 in a red for a 3/4. When you cast your first spell each turn, you add double red. So, getting a 2 mana discount on your second spell each turn. We've seen these type of effects before. They're generally not super amazing. It's just, 4 mana for a 3/4 is pretty bad. And, yeah, it's pretty good to get 2 mana, but like, is it? The problem is that you don't get the mana up front, and you're paying 4 mana for a 3/4, which you could pay 3 mana for a 3/4, and that card would be like kind of medium. So the first time you activate this, you're maybe getting your like value back. Like, maybe you're catching up on tempo, but like still like a little behind, maybe even. So like, that's why I don't like this very much. Scalestorm Summoner. 2 in red for a 3/3. When it attacks, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So this card is obviously excellent if it ever gets to attack. and you have a 4-power creature. However, it is also a 3-mana 3/3 that does not do anything unless it can attack. So there have to be some limitations put on how good it is, but I do think it's, like, obviously it's super busted if it has good attacks, right? Like, if it has good attacks and the trigger's going to activate, it's basically just going to take over the game. But it essentially doesn't do anything when it enters the battlefield. And it does require a little bit of finagling, and you have to commit pre-combat to making something power 4 or greater. So it's got enough stuff going for it that I think it is being held back from tier 1 and will merely be a tier 2 card. Scorching Shot, 2 red mana for a sorcery, deal 5 damage to target creature. Yeah, I think this removal spell's fine. Not super excited about it. Again, double pipped, tough to cast, but you can double spell with it, like whatever, and it deals with stuff. It's good. It's fine. It's a playable card. Not exciting. Sorcery speed removal. It is efficient. It is a very efficient removal spell, but whatever. At the end of the day, it's just removal. Slick Shot, Show Off. 1 on a red for a 1/2 with flying and haste. When you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and you can plot it for 1 on a red. So, obviously this card's very good. I think you're actually going to be plotting this a decent amount of the time. You may think that sounds stupid. Why wouldn't I just cast it and get get my damage in? And in a lot of cases you'd be right, but it's just going to depend on the complexion of your hand. And I actually really like this design. I think this is a really cool design. For Constructed, I think it's a abomination of a design, and they should not have printed it because it's just gonna. This is just gonna be a deck. Like this is just gonna be like prowess dot deck. This thing is unbeatable because on turn 2 you plot it, and then you have your counter spell or your spell pierce or your whatever up on turn 3, and you play this, and then you attack, and your opponent's like, well, I guess I can't ever remove it because how is that possible? It's 0 mana. It's like, yeah, well, there you go. So yeah, I think this is going to be good and Constructed. I think it's going to be slightly worse in Limited, but still pretty good. I still like it a lot. It has a flexible card. It plays well with the things you're trying to do with red. It has haste. Not a lot to complain about. Stinger Back Terror. 2 red for a 7/7 flying trample. It gets -1/-1 for each card in your hand, and you can pay 2 and a red to plot it. So, this card is just all stats. That's what it's doing, right? Doesn't need TB, whatever. That's fine. So, let's kind of walk through what happens in an average game, right? On turn 4, what are you doing? Well, really, on turn 3, what are you doing? Because you can plot this on turn 3. This is a cheaper plot cost than its actual casting cost. Honestly, without plot, I think I would have graded this lower. I think the plot is real upside because essentially you're getting to cast this on turn 3. Like you're getting to pay 3 mana for this card on turn 4, and okay, let's say you even just you're on the play. You play a 2-drop or a 3-drop, just one of the two, and you play 3 lands, and then you play 4 lands by turn 4. You've drawn 3 cards, puts you up to 10 total cards. You played 3 lands. You go down to 6. So you'd be going down to 5 cards in hand. And that's kind of your worst case scenario with this. You know what I mean? You're just gonna be able to the fact that you can buff this to be enormous, on turn 5, but by the time it gets to attack, you're never blocking with this anyways, right? You're never gonna block with this anyways because it's just gonna kill your opponent faster than they can race you, so you're just never gonna block. So it doesn't really matter how big this thing is on blocks. I know that I've talked a lot about threatening to block being a thing that's good, but even this not threatening to block is fine. Whatever, it's okay. Because on turn 5 you're threatening to just hit your opponent for 1 billion. You just play whatever. Your hand is at that point going to be 2 or 3 cards, and then this thing's 4/4 or 5/5, and it's just. We saw that Krenko's Buzzcrusher was a tier 2 card, and that was just a 4-mana 4/4 flying trample. This card is A 4-mana 4/4 flying trample, basically, like, at worst, it's a 4-mana 4/4 flying trample. And at best, it's a 4-mana, like, 6/6 flying trample that you can cast for 0 mana on turn 4. Like, you can cast for 3 and then play it on turn 4 for 0. I mean, that's a lot of upside compared to Krenko's Bows Crusher, I'll say that. Take for a Ride. 2 in a red for a sorcery. Take for a Ride has flash as long as you've committed a crime this turn. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. Our prayers have been answered. They have printed probably the best act of treason in history. They've done it. They've actually done it. They printed an instant speed act of treason. Oh man, this card is a beating. A beating. Because it wins you all the games that Act of Treason wins you, which is like steal your big block. You played one blocker to stabilize, steal it, hit you for 10, win, right? So it has all those same use cases. But in like a more mid-rangey game, you can also just go, alright, I'm going to use my 2-drop, pay 1 mana, ping you for 1, steal your 3-drop, have it trade with your other 3-drop, and then I win, because I've killed 2 of your creatures with 1 card. This card is ridiculous. This card is absurd. I honestly want to put it in tier 1, although it does require some enabling. It requires instant speed crime committing, which, not easy to do. Not trivial to be able to commit crimes for cheap enough at instant speed to activate this. However, the fact that you can, and your opponent basically can't do anything about it. Like, if you commit a crime at instant speed, and then you target their creature with this card, the best thing they can do is, like, sacrifice it or remove it in some way. So they're still removing, you're still getting like a 2-for-1, right? You're removing their creature and you're getting the spell. Unless they have, I mean, I don't think they print it, I don't believe there's like a deadly what the fuck, what is it called? It's Deadly Derision? No. It's the one that's in the artifact set, or the one from LCI. The black 2 sacrifice your thing, make a treasure, or whatever. There's the Village Rites, which is that an instant? I actually don't remember. I think it's an instant. So if they have that, this is kind of a beating, but what are you going to do? You're going to lose some. Your opponents aren't going to be playing that card very often anyway. That's okay. It actually might be a sorcery, I'm not sure. Alright, I have Village Rites literally on my desk. Village Rites is an instant. I don't know if the other one's an instant or not. It probably is. I don't see why they'd make a worse Village Rites. Anyways, yeah, this card's a house. All you need is ways, like, this is just a deck. This is just like a card that you're going to put in your aggro decks, and I think this goes in any red deck that can commit crimes at instant speed, which is to say probably a lot of them. Like, again, you can also just go, like, on turn 5, deal 2 to something, and then steal something. Pretty good. I don't know. Again, it also there's finickiness to this. Your opponent doesn't always have 2. There's a reason it's not in tier 1, and it's the finickiness. Like, your opponent just doesn't always have 2 creatures that will trade well, but it's usually going to be good enough to just, like, steal their thing, and even just using one of their creatures to chump another one of their creatures is going to be good, plenty good enough. Because you are A, gaining a bunch of life, and B, you're, removing one of their creatures for 3 mana. So this is just, this card's just so unbelievably absurd. And I'm so glad they printed it, because it's going to be a nightmare it's just a nightmare to play against this. It's just, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this thing. It may come back to haunt me, but I'm excited. Terror of the Peaks. 3 red for a 5/4 flying. Spells your opponents cast the target. Terror repeats. Cost 3 additional life to cast. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. This card's nuts. We've seen it before. Yes, it doesn't have an ETB. That's fine. It has Ward, pay 3 life, so it's basically hitting your opponent for 3 off the bat. If your opponent doesn't remove it, you basically just play anything and you deal whatever to all of their stuff and kill them. It's just a monster. It takes over the game. Really big. So, No issues for me. This card's great. Thunder Salvo. 1 red for an instant. It deals X damage to target creature where X is 2 plus the number of other spells you've cast this turn. So I originally had this a bit higher, but I moved it down because the base rate is pretty bad. 2 mana for a deal 2. It's not where you want to be, man. It's not as bad as 3 mana for a deal 2 at instant speed, but it's not where you want to be. This loses some value being an instant because casting multiple spells on your opponent's turn gets a lot more difficult. But then again, you oftentimes want to be casting your removal spells on your turn because your opponent's tapped out. So there's a give and a take there. There's better payoffs for playing 2 spells in a turn than this. But, I mean, maybe you play 3 spells. Like, triple spelling is not a thing that we really consider very often in Limited, although in this format it can happen sometimes with plot. So maybe the deal 6 upside in the mid to late game is not something that's completely to be ignored. And I could actually see myself moving this back up to tier 2. I think it's somewhere on the borderline. Tell me how I really feel. How do I really feel? How am I really feeling? I'm really feeling like I'm going to move this back up to tier 2 is how I'm really feeling. Alright, I did it. I moved it back up to tier 2. I talked myself into it. Probably shouldn't have, but whatever. And on to the final red card. It's Trick Shot. It's 4 and a red. It's an instant. It deals 6 damage to one target creature and 2 damage to one other target creature token. There are going to be a lot of tokens running around. This is 5 mana, deals 6 at instant speed, which is a little bit better rate than you usually get on these. I still think it's not quite enough. 5 mana removal is just a lot worse than removal that does not cost 5 mana. Even if it hits 2 things, there are going to be a lot of tokens, so I don't know. I think this is semi-reasonable, but I'm just not excited about 5 mana removal in my deck. And that's it. That's red. That's my set review for red. I hope there was some enjoyment here, some enlightenment. I hope that, I was right, and the cards are actually the way that I thought they are, but that's never the case. We always learn and adapt to how the format actually plays out. So we will be seeing that very shortly, and I hope you stick around for more of the set review.